But yeah, I think that spirit of, that pulled together spirit is still alive in China. Now, I, again, am what most Marxist-Leninists, or even Maoists, would consider ultra-left. I think the failure of the Cultural Revolution has two main components. The first is the international scene. I don't approve of Khrushchev. I do believe he was a revisionist. I believe the Soviet Union was revisionist. I do not believe, and this is where I'm going to get myself in trouble with the left wing, I do not believe it was state capital. I believe it was messed up. I believe it was bureaucratized in many key ways. But also, they were still supporting people's revolutions around the world. They were still building socialism throughout, however poorly they were doing it, and I certainly admit that. They were certainly patronizing and condescending to the People's Republic of China and the Chinese, and I think there was racism there. But nevertheless, you'll notice at the end of my lecture, one of the key reasons the Cultural Revolution came to an end was because of border tensions with the Soviet Union. It was not foreordained by the cards or by the stars or by some theoretical aspect. The Soviet Union and the People's Republic of China would have to have fought violently. And I don't accept that they could have. And had they not done that, the Cultural Revolution could have continued. So that's one. The second thing is this. The Cultural Revolution was, I've heard it characterized as this, and I can't really disagree, that the Cultural Revolution was nearly a 10-year civil war that went on in China. And if you look at the actions of the Red Guards and their fights against various groups, which I think I've probably been repetitive about saying, there's a strong reason to believe that yes, this was a civil war. The unfortunate thing, I think, and this is again my personal position, is that Mao called an end to it. And Mao called an end to it because it was spiraling out of control. And rather than focusing on giving the workers and the students dual power, instead of creating working class mass organizations that had power to rival the Communist Party and had power to rival the PLA, he was afraid, justifiably so, of the dangers that this would create. And so he called an end to it. And so I think those are the two reasons that the values of the Cultural Revolution died out, is because it wasn't carried out to its conclusion, despite the historical evidence otherwise that it was dead by at least 76, if not by 68 or 69. So yeah, those are the two big failures of the Cultural Revolution as I see them. But yeah, right. Kimmy?
Oh yeah. I actually, you had mentioned earlier that a woman had come exceedingly close to becoming a state leader, and I've noticed actively throughout the lecture that Mao's wife was pretty engaged, and I was just wondering, would that have been her?
That was her.
Really?
Yeah, she was the head of the so-called Gang of Four, and yeah, there was a very strong possibility that she was going to be the next leader. If the Gang of Four would have won, if she wouldn't have been the leader, she would have effectively had control over the PRC. But yeah, she was the one who was on the verge of becoming the leader of China. Even if she, like, Deng Xiaoping ultimately became the nominal leader, but he still led through Hua Guofei, Hao Guofeng. So even though Hao Guofeng was the ostensible leader, even before he was deposed, Deng Xiaoping was the real leader. It probably would have been, what's his name? I forget it. It's Wang Yo or something like that. I can't even pretend I know what it is. But anyway, there was this politically inexperienced person that she basically controlled and listened to everything she said. But yeah, she would almost certainly been the next leader of China. Any other? No. Okay. Well, yes, in the back.
Have you just gathered this information from readings, or how did you become so informed about all this?
Well, I read a lot of really terrible books on China. And then I read encyclopedia stuff on China. And then, again, very, very, very embarrassing. And I hope this isn't a giant FU since we're inviting one of our people here. Yeah, actually the Cosmo Project has a 6-page, or a 6-essay series on specifically the Cultural Revolution. And so you can read that. Also documentaries, A Century of Revolution.
Century of Revolution.
And a bunch of other stuff. You just pick it up over time. But those are the main things that I actually, remember.
Cool. Okay, thanks.
No problem. That's Andrea. Max again?
Okay, question number 2 then. Do you see the Cultural Revolution as something that fit China perfectly, or do you think that other revolutions should look for ways of implementing cultural revolutions that will work within their specific circumstances?
I think I understand why you asked that question, but it's perfectly obvious to me, which is we should take the Cultural Revolution as a model, a flawed model at that, but as a model. But what we always should institute is what will actually concretely work, because Marxism, Leninism, and Maoism are not religious texts to be followed blindly. They are principles that are to be interpreted and applied creatively. So to whatever extent we can mobilize students, mobilize the masses, build other mass institutions of power, radically rethink what free speech means, and the ways we associate with each other. Yes, we should do all of those things. Does that mean we have to have a big poster campaign? No, not necessarily. It would really depend on context and what's concretely going on.
Right. Maybe how I should have phrased it is, do you think that other communist revolutions that have happened would have benefited from a type of cultural revolution type of things?
Yes.
Okay.
It's worth noting. Again, I constantly getting myself in trouble thing. It's worth noting in Cuba, right? You have mass organization and mass mobilization all the time, and you have revolutionary councils and neighborhood councils and councils in the defense of the revolution. Now, they're often integrated with the state in key ways in which the Cultural Revolution is not. To what extent they would have benefited from not being integrated with the state, again, a matter of fierce debate. But you'll notice that Cuba's still around, and the Soviet Union is not. And the Soviet Union, again, had radical bureaucratization that allowed for the possibility of the elites to essentially grab power and say, hey, by the way, guys, you remember how we were socialists? We're now carving this up, and now I own a lot of oil, which was suboptimal. I'm concerned about, it's suboptimal. I'm concerned for the Chinese Revolution, given that there's a lot of now private investment there. But to what extent that private investment is real, and to what extent it is state industry just trying to suck up American dollars in factories, I don't know. For what it's worth, I know a business guy who goes over there frequently, and what he said is he's because he's a business guy, he's really critical, and he's like, it's all fake. They have this fake layer of capitalism, but if you look at all these private firms, the actual people who own them are state industries. And he's like, they invite people over. Well, one of the conditions is after 20 years, you have to give over the factory to China. And also, anything you produce there, you have to give them the blueprints. And he's like, well, Audi came over and, they built this factory in China. They're selling a bunch of Audis. Well, just a few years back, there was a car called the Red Flag. And it's the damnedest thing. It looks exactly like an Audi. And it drives exactly like an Audi and has all the parts of an Audi, but it's the Red Flag. So, to what extent, this is just a developmental mode where they're like, oh yeah, we love your capitalism, we love your markets, invest, and then 20 years later it's like, by the way, you just paid for all of our factories. I don't know. But I'm certainly hoping that's what it is. So, is that, and maybe they need another cultural revolution. I don't know. But, does that answer? All right, well, I've done the teacher going down the line thing, so does anyone have any other questions? All right, well then I will call this to a close. And remember, uphold Mao Zedong thought.